You are 10 years old, and the marble beneath your knees is colder than you thought stone could be. The scent of burning incense curls around your face like a serpent, sweet at first, then suffocating. You were told this house was beautiful, that your new life would be full of luxury, clean sheets, and warm food. But here, inside this dim, private room behind the peristyle, the only thing warm is the sweat sliding down your bare back. Behind you, footsteps. Not hurried, not cruel, just deliberate. Heavy soles pressing into mosaic tiles. You don't look up, but you hear the quiet sigh of silk robes brushing past the doorway. And then, silence. That awful silence. You know what it means now. You are not sick. You are not injured. You are not disobedient. And yet you are here, alone, on display, in a house where your name no longer matters. You are not you anymore. You are property. And tonight, your master has called you to his private chamber. But this is only the beginning. Think Roman civilization was all philosophy, public baths, and architecture? Think again. Beneath the marble facades and stoic busts, Rome perfected a far darker legacy. A system of intimate slavery embedded directly into the home, not just in public brothels or military encampments, not in whispered alleys, in the atrium, in the triclinium, in the cubiculum, in the bedrooms of senators, the corridors of wealthy matrons, the villas of generals, and, most disturbingly, within reach of children like you who never stood a chance. While modern audiences speak of Rome as the cradle of law and civilization, they forget one brutal detail. That same law explicitly allowed one human to own another, and to do with that body anything they desired. The term familia didn't mean family. It meant household property. And you, bought at the market in chains, are now part of that property. Slaves weren't just farmhands or cooks. Some were purchased for a single purpose, to serve the private, physical whims of their masters. They were chosen for beauty, trained in submission, and denied even the right to say no. The puer delicatus, the delicate boy, was no secret. He was a fixture of elite Roman homes, a status symbol, a gift of flesh. And no one protected him. No one wanted to. You wake before the sun. You always do now. The stone beneath your mat is too hard for real sleep. You're in a side chamber, one of many, just close enough to your master's bedroom that you can hear his breathing when he's restless. It comforts you in a strange, terrifying way. At least when he sleeps, you are safe. Yesterday, one of the older boys was taken away. He was getting too tall, too vocal, too attached. They said he might be sent to the fields, but you saw the look in the Villicus's eyes, the steward who manages the slaves. You know what that look means. You know the boy won't be coming back. Your training has begun. Not just in obedience, but in the twisted rituals of Roman domestic life. You must bathe when commanded, be silent unless spoken to, and smile during your inspections. You must learn how to entertain, to flatter, to sense a mood before it turns sour. You are not allowed to feel disgust, fear, or pain. Those emotions are for people, not for you, not for property. In 4 CE, the Lex Alia Sentia codified the legal categories of slaves in Rome. Among them, domestic slaves, field laborers, and personal attendants. But within these categories existed a hidden subtype, those whose roles were never spoken aloud in official records, but whose presence was embedded in daily life. Young slaves, chosen for beauty, placed in the cubiculum, the master's bedroom, for constant availability. Roman sources do not hide this. The satirist Martial refers to his friend's blond boy kept for evenings. Pliny the Younger mentions entertainers with faces like Greek statues gifted to senators. Even Augustus, Rome's first emperor, kept delicati in his private court, boys dressed in fine linens, trained to entertain with songs, conversation, and more. This wasn't a hidden shame. It was a refined indulgence, and the market responded. Slave traders began advertising physical features, skin color, eye shape, voice tone, and, most crucially, virginity. It raised a child's price by thousands of sesterces. Your innocence was something to be sold, something to be broken. Now you're being led down the hall again, past the bronze oil lamps flickering against frescoed walls, past the lararium where household gods watch from their niches with cold, painted eyes. You catch your reflection in the polished silver doorplate. A child, barefoot, shoulders hunched, face blank. No more tears left. The chamber door is open. Inside, the master is reclining on a low couch, sipping watered wine. He gestures without looking. You step inside, trained not to speak, not to hesitate. The air smells of myrrh and fermented honey. Behind the curtain, you know the bed waits, and so do the rules. Tomorrow no one will ask if you are all right. No one will see your silence as strange. You will be expected to perform your chores as if nothing happened, because in Roman eyes, nothing did. You are not a victim. You are a luxury. And soon you'll discover the price of being owned for pleasure in a world that worships discipline, but excuses everything behind closed doors. But here's where it gets worse. You're not alone. And what's happening in your master's house? It's happening in thousands of homes across Rome, each with their own set of rules, their own hierarchy of abuse, and their own system for turning innocence into obedience. And the law? It's watching, and doing nothing. You rise before dawn, but not by choice. The schedule tells you when to wake, when to clean, when to smile, and when to kneel. Today, the Villicus hands you a wax tablet with your name etched beside a crude sketch of the master's crest. Next to it, a time. 3rd hour. 3rd hour. You don't ask what it means. You already know. It's not a task. It's an appointment. You've been added to the list. Again. You'll bathe twice before then. Once in cold water to firm your skin. Once in oil to soften your scent. You'll be dressed in a fresh tunic, left open at the shoulder. You'll be fed grapes and instructed to chew slowly to avoid swelling your belly. Your hair will be curled, your lips dabbed with crushed poppy to deepen their color. You're 10 years old, and every moment of your morning has been designed to make you more pleasing. But here's what they don't tell you. This is how the entire system works. The Roman home wasn't just a place of luxury. It was a machine, and its fuel was human flesh. Think slavery in ancient Rome was only about plowing fields or rowing galley ships. That's only half the truth. The other half is far more intimate and far more disturbing. Roman domestic slavery reached deep into the private lives of their owners. And the most expensive slaves? They didn't work. They served. Personally, silently, often unclothed. The system was known. It was legal. It was profitable. And it operated inside the homes of Rome's wealthiest families without shame. You're shown to the cubicula, the master's private sleeping quarters. It's not your first time, and it won't be the last. The room is hushed. The air hangs heavy with a mixture of sweat, perfume, and old wine. The master reclines on his side, propped on one elbow, bored eyes scanning you as if comparing you to a memory. You stand still, heart racing, waiting for instruction. It might be a massage. It might be entertainment. It might be something you don't yet have a word for. But this isn't a moment of desire. This is a routine. Because in this household and countless others, slaves like you are assigned to rotation schedules. Not for cleaning, not for errands, for availability. Slave logs, actual documents discovered in archaeological digs at Pompeii and Herculaneum, record names, ages, and functions of household slaves. One preserved inventory lists 13 slaves under the age of 16. 9 of them are marked with the Greek letter delta. Delicatus. It means preferred. It means beautiful. It means touched. You're not the only one in this house. There are others, older, younger, some trained in music, others in silence. One girl, Livia, hasn't spoken in over a year. Her schedule is different from yours. Her tunics are embroidered. She only ever enters the master's chamber at night. You once asked her why. She didn't answer. She just looked past you, into a distance you couldn't see, and returned to folding the sheets with mechanical care. And the worst part? This isn't considered shameful. Among Rome's elite, it's expected. In fact, a slave who hasn't been broken in by a certain age is seen as defective. Pliny the Elder wrote extensively about domestic life, but between the lines, he hints at a world where abuse is so common, it no longer registers as cruelty. In one letter, he casually mentions a friend who keeps a fine boy of Thracian stock near the villa's east wing. No comment, no moral judgment, because none was needed. Owning bodies, especially beautiful young ones, was not controversial in Rome. It was a privilege. And the law? It stood firmly on the master's side. According to the Lex Julia de Adulteris, 18 BCE, a Roman citizen could be prosecuted for seducing another citizen's wife, but not for violating a slave. Slaves in Roman legal thought could not be raped, because rape implied rights, and slaves had none. No consent, no age of protection, no recourse. You weren't considered a person. You were an object, and objects couldn't say no. At your second bath, your skin is scrubbed until it stings. The villicus's assistant hands you a linen cloth and a strip of perfumed leather to tie around your wrist. It's not for decoration. It's to signal readiness. The master likes organization. He doesn't want to ask twice. Down the hall, you hear giggles, not from joy, but from panic. Someone has made a mistake. They'll pay for it in silence, maybe in bread rations, maybe in bruises. You focus on your breathing. Inhale, smile, walk. Because that's what the manual says. Yes, there's a manual. You saw it once, left open on the villicus's desk. A series of household rules written in perfect Latin script. The boy assigned to evening service must be bathed, oiled, and clothed by nona hora. No perfume if injured, no eye contact unless requested. This isn't decadence. It's administration. The master's guests arrive for the evening. Wine flows. Laughter echoes across the mosaic floors. You're summoned, along with another boy and 2 girls. You stand near the column, arms at your sides, listening. Someone comments on your posture. Someone else asks if you're from Hispania. The master corrects them. No, you were born in Numidia. Your price was high, he boasts, but worth it. They nod admiringly. You're not a person. You're a purchase. One guest turns to you and says, "You'll remember this night when you're older." He chuckles. Everyone does, including your master. And you? You smile, because that's the only thing left to do. But now comes the part they don't speak of in public. After the laughter. After the wine. After the guests have gone. The list still lies open on the table. You see tomorrow's names, and yours is there again. What you don't know is this. Some boys don't come back from the lists. They're transferred, broken, or simply vanish. You once asked where one had gone. The villicus only said he outgrew his use. So you remain small, quiet, valuable, but not for long, because what happens next will make tonight look almost gentle. Now that you've seen what private slavery looked like behind Rome's polished marble, you're beginning to see the patterns hidden in history's shadows. If uncovering these buried truths resonates with your curiosity about the real human experience, staying with this journey will take you deeper into the stories Rome tried hardest to forget. You're about to enter the world of Roman slave auctions, where children were displayed like prized possessions, and youth and innocence were among the most highly valued traits. And this was just one household, one law. Across the empire, thousands lived in silence, stripped of voice, of personhood, of even the right to resist. If you want to uncover more buried truths like this, truths Rome wanted erased from memory. Hit subscribe now. It's the only way to keep digging beneath the polished statues and find the blood-stained foundations they were built on. You're lying perfectly still beneath the silk sheets, eyes wide open. The room around you flickers with soft lamplight, its shadows dancing across walls painted with scenes of Bacchic revelry, grapes, laughter, bodies entwined in impossible poses. You used to think the paintings were pretty. Now you understand their meaning. Tonight is different. You haven't been summoned for private service. Not this time. Tonight you're meant to be part of the entertainment. The Villicus has explained it carefully. Important guests are visiting from Carthage. The master wishes to honor them. A special display, a performance. And you've been selected. You are no longer just property. You are now a gift. By now, you've learned to smile on cue. You've learned how to lower your eyes, how to walk gracefully, how to speak just enough to charm without speaking too much to offend. But performing for strangers, this is new. And as the bronze doors swing open and voices echo through the marble hall, you feel a weight settle in your chest. Not fear, not quite. Something heavier, resignation. Because this isn't just another night. It's a show. And you are the centerpiece. In elite Roman households, it was not uncommon for wealthy citizens to host convivia, lavish private banquets that blurred the line between feast and theater. Guests reclined on couches, sipping spiced wine as music played and dancers performed. But among Rome's most powerful families, especially those far from prying eyes, these evenings could take darker turns. Documented letters from the household of Lucius Calpurnius Piso, a senator under Emperor Nero, describe evenings of rare delicacy, in which trained young companions were presented in choreographed sequences of music, poetry, and physical elegance. The term used, elegantia corporis, masked what was, in truth, a display of obedience, beauty, and possession. The puer delicatus, once simply a household servant, became centerpiece of these performances. And behind the laughter and applause was an unspoken truth. They weren't being entertained. They were being reminded who held the power. You are led into the atrium, where the light is golden and the air smells of roasted figs and frankincense. Music swells from the corner, where two musicians pluck at lyres. You're not alone. 3 others stand beside you, each dressed in translucent tunics, each painted delicately with powdered lead and saffron dyes. 1 boy from Syria, silent as stone. 1 girl from Gaul, eyes glazed with practiced stillness, and a younger one, barely 8 years old, whispering prayers under his breath. The guests recline, smiling. Their jewelry gleams in the firelight. 1 lifts a goblet and gestures toward you. The Villicus nods. The music begins. You step forward and you dance. Not for art, not for joy. For approval and survival. This wasn't unique to your master's villa. Historical accounts describe similar chamber entertainments in the homes of Roman elites. According to Suetonius, Emperor Tiberius kept a villa in Capri, where young performers, trained in silence and flattery, would appear nightly before imperial guests. They called them spintriae, not by their names, but by their function. The historian Tacitus, in hushed tones, refers to performances that served less to amuse and more to instruct, meaning not education, but demonstration. A display of what control looks like when the soul of a person has been replaced with perfect obedience. You finish your performance with a bow. The guests clap politely. The master does not. He rises, approaches you, and places 1 ringed hand beneath your chin. Lifting your gaze to meet his, he says, "Still not broken." That's good. Then he turns to the guests and adds, "I prefer them to retain something of their spark. It makes the taming more rewarding." You keep your face still. Inside, something sinks further out of reach. Later, you return to your quarters, heart pounding. The girl from Gaul is already curled on her cot, back turned. The Syrian boy is rubbing his knees, bruised from kneeling too long. The youngest hasn't returned. You ask the villicus where he is. The answer is quiet, matter of fact. He wasn't needed anymore. And just like that, someone vanishes. No outcry, no record, no name scratched from stone. Just another life swallowed by the silence of a system that pretended to be civilized while consuming its youngest offerings. But here's what makes it worse. These performances weren't deviations. They were rehearsed, documented, expected. A tablet discovered in Pompeii details preparations for a private feast in 58 CE, including instructions for slaves of suitable age and voice to appear at precise intervals during the courses. It lists timing, costumes, and even fallback substitutions in case of injury or unwillingness. That word, unwillingness, tells you everything. They knew, and they planned for it. And what of those who resisted? They didn't last. Refusal was punished, sometimes with reduced rations, sometimes with a public flogging, but more often with replacement. Because in Rome, nothing was irreplaceable, especially not a slave who spoke out of turn. You heard once of a boy in a nearby villa who ran. He made it past the kitchen gardens, across the olive terraces. Almost reached the Via Latina. They found him by morning. After that, the villa's walls were raised another 5 feet, not to keep others out, but to keep you in. You're now 16. Your bones ache differently. The villicus looks at you with calculation, not admiration. You've noticed your name slipping further down the service list. And when new boys arrive, it's your task to show them the ropes, to teach them how to walk without sound, how to fold their tunic just so, how to smile when it hurts. You do not tell them what comes next, because you know, and you know that knowing doesn't help. But now you begin to understand something else, something crueler. This isn't just about ownership. This is about normalization. Rome didn't just use bodies, it trained minds. It turned pain into routine, obedience into art, and silence into currency. It made you complicit in your own undoing. And you're not the only one. Because the villa isn't an isolated case. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands, across the empire, each with its own villicus, each with its own list, each with its own vanished names no one will ever speak again. The worst is still ahead. You are dressed in purple now. Not because you asked, not because you earned it, but because someone else decided your color should match the furniture. The tunic is finer than anything you've ever worn, dyed with rare murex shells worth more than your body weight in silver. A heavy gold pendant hangs from your neck. It's not jewelry. It's a symbol. You've been summoned to the Domus Palatina, the palace. You thought you knew what power looked like. The master's villa, the private guests, the banquet performances. But you were wrong. That was only the training ground. Now you are in Rome, and Rome has rules of its own. The Palatine hill casts a long shadow, both literal and symbolic. For centuries it housed the emperors of the world's greatest empire. Within its corridors, laws were made, generals rewarded, provinces divided. And now, in the reign of Domitian, something else happens here too. Ceremonies, not religious, not political, personal, intimate, controlled. You were chosen, gifted, actually, by your master, presented as tribute to the imperial household, a gesture of loyalty, a sacrifice of silence. You were not consulted. You were simply delivered. The palace staff doesn't speak to you, not at first. They gesture. They wash you in rosewater. They clip your nails, pluck stray hairs, paint your eyelids with crushed mineral powder. You are not prepared for politics. You are being prepared for display. You hear whispers in the corridor, others like you, trained in poetry, song, and silence. No names are spoken, no laughter echoes. This is not a place for joy. It's a place of performance. And the audience wears purple. Under Emperor Domitian, the palace's inner chambers become something else entirely. More than a home, more than a court, a theater. Contemporary sources, like the poet Statius and the biographer Suetonius, describe an imperial household layered in opulence and secrecy. Rooms with ceilings painted to mimic the heavens, floors of heated marble, tables inlaid with mother-of-pearl and bone. But behind these marvels lies another architecture, a system of controlled indulgence. One record from the Commentari Palatini describes a chamber euphemistically named Camera Tertia, the third room. Its function, not documented, but the inventory lists cushions, ointments, and musical instruments, and 7 slaves under the age of 14. You're called in the evening. The chamber smells of myrrh and wine. Golden light spills across the mosaic floor. The emperor reclines beneath a canopy of silk. His face is unreadable. To his right sits a senator. To his left, a priest of the imperial cult. Both sipping wine. Both watching you. You are instructed to dance. It is not the dance you once performed in your master's villa. This one has meaning, symbolism, a reenactment of myth, Apollo taming the wild boy Hyacinthus. You are Hyacinthus. But here's what makes it even darker. You don't understand the story, only that you're expected to smile at the end. The ceremony concludes. The guests nod in approval. You are praised for your posture, your stillness, your lack of hesitation. That last one is important. Hesitation implies thought. And in this place, thinking is dangerous. By morning, you are not returned to your master. You are absorbed. Now a familia Caesaris, a member of the emperor's private household. The uniform changes. The training intensifies. You are told what to say, how to speak, what expression to wear depending on who enters the room. You are placed in a new schedule. Not for labor, not even for service, for availability. You begin to understand how Rome sustains itself, not just with soldiers and taxes, but with silence. Every day you are on display but not fully seen. You are a presence, a whisper, a thing. And when new guests arrive from provinces abroad, you are presented again, this time not as a servant but as evidence, proof of Rome's power. Suetonius describes how Domitian restructured the palace, converting private chambers into performance spaces. A room known as the Triclinium Minus was used for private suppers, during which guests were expected to watch the dramatization of divine myths through human actors. He doesn't say who the actors were, but you know, because you were one of them. The difference between villa and palace is not scale, it's purpose. In the villa, you are used behind closed doors. In the palace, you are used to make a point. Foreign envoys are shown Rome's treasures, not just its gold and art, but its mastery over bodies. Senators are invited to witness performances, then tested by their reaction. Disgust is noted. Approval is rewarded. Some refuse to attend. They vanish from politics within weeks. Others participate and rise. You begin to recognize their faces, not because they speak to you, but because they don't. There is one man who never looks away, Senator Gellius, a rising star from Hispania. Each time you're called to perform, he watches you with unwavering attention. One night, after a particularly long ceremony, you are summoned not by the Villicus, but by Gellius himself. He does not touch you. He does not speak. He simply studies you for several minutes, then says quietly, "Rome is discipline. You are part of that discipline. Be grateful." Then he walks away. You never see him again. But his words remain, like an echo you cannot silence. And here's what makes it truly unbearable. You begin to believe it, that you are part of something bigger, that your suffering has purpose, that Rome's power requires this silence, that you are lucky to be here instead of some dusty field or forgotten alley. This is the final transformation, not of your body, but of your mind. and it's not reversible. What happens next in the Imperial Palace will shatter even the illusion of meaning, because soon Rome's entertainments will outgrow private chambers. They will become public displays, and the roles you're forced to play will no longer pretend to be myth. They will be law. You're 17 now, but age in this place doesn't mean time past. It means use past. The silk robes are looser around your frame. The paint doesn't stick to your skin the way it once did. And worst of all, they've stopped calling you by your assigned name. Now you are just him, as in, bring him, dress him, replace him. You know what that means. And you've seen what happens next. You've watched others fade out of favor, first from the banquet chambers, then from the inner rooms, and finally from the registry itself. One day, they're there. The next, their cot is empty, and no one speaks of them again. You've tried to stay useful, to stay quiet, to stay alive. But in a world that measures value by silence and softness, your expiration date was written the moment your voice deepened. And now, your only remaining currency is obedience. In Roman law, the slave was res, a thing, a piece of property, a unit of economic and social exchange. And the palace, more than any field or mine, enforced that definition with merciless clarity. The Digest of Justinian, Rome's monumental codex of imperial law, records it plainly. The body of the slave belongs to his master. All fruits of that body, labor, offspring, pleasure, are likewise the master's by right. The word fruits does not refer to harvest. It refers to yield, flesh, reproduction, use. And while the outer courts discussed inheritance and taxation, the inner sanctums enforced a different kind of law, availability without objection. Even priests weren't exempt from the cycle. By the late 1st century CE, temple slaves were donated to imperial celebrations under the guise of piety. A young Syrian acolyte named Callisthenes, barely 12, was described in records from the Acta Arvalium as an offering of grace and fragrance, presented for the comfort of the divine house. He never reappeared in any register again. You once tried to resist. Not a scream, not a blow, just a hesitation. One evening, as you were being prepared for a performance in the Aula Regia, you paused, just for a moment. Your foot faltered stepping into the dye bath. Your eyes met the servants with something that could have been pleading. It was enough. You were removed from the rotation for 3 days. Not punished, not harmed, just excluded. Those 3 days were the worst of your life. No food, no bedding, no contact. A chamber with stone walls and no candlelight. The sound of dripping water, endless, maddening. A strategy known among the palace stewards as purification by absence, designed not to harm the body but to unmake the will. When they brought you back, you begged to be reassigned. You promised never to pause again, and they believed you, because now you were broken in the right way. But here's where the system escalated further. By the reign of Hadrian, Rome had perfected its machinery of performance, and the roles once confined to hidden rooms began appearing in public ceremonies, festivals, religious rituals, victory celebrations. And you were expected to play your part. One such ceremony, the Ludi Floralis, originated as a spring festival for fertility and rebirth. But by the 2nd century CE, it had become a sanctioned spectacle of excess. The Fasti Ostienses, a preserved calendar from the city of Ostia, notes that youths of exceptional refinement were paraded through the amphitheater, adorned in gold, to mimic the gifts of the gods. It was theater, but with real bodies. Your body. You remember the amphitheater's noise. Not cheering, laughter, amusement, curiosity. You were masked in gold leaf, arms painted in ochre, ordered to pose beside statues of divine twins, Castor and Pollux. You were supposed to represent harmony, duality, beauty, but your legs trembled the entire time, because behind you the guards carried canes, not for protection, for correction. The role of punishment in the Roman system wasn't random. It was structured, strategic. A slave who attempted escape, showed resistance, or simply failed to meet the visual demands of a ceremony was subject to correctio privata, private correction. This didn't mean torture, not publicly. Not in the empire's moral vocabulary, it meant recalibration. Recalibration that could include whipping, confinement, sensory deprivation, or psychological isolation. One Roman manual for stewards, De Cura Servorum, advised, "Let correction follow without hatred, but without delay. The fruit of resistance is silence. The price of silence is restoration." You came to understand what that meant. They didn't want revenge. They wanted results. Over time, even the nobles began to feel the cost, because the performances weren't limited to slaves. The emperor's appetite for control extended to senators, generals, and visiting dignitaries. You watched once as a senator from Achaia, gray-haired, trembling, was ordered to wear the same gold leaf as the palace performers. Not for punishment, for demonstration. His crime? Opposition to a tax reform. His punishment? Humiliation through participation. He obeyed, because resistance, even from the elite, meant erasure. But some drew the line. A noblewoman named Calpurnia, known for her lineage, not her defiance, refused to send her daughter to the emperor's temple festival. Her refusal was not public. She wrote a private letter, pleading that her child be spared from display. The emperor's response was not swift. It was deliberate. Calpurnia's estates were seized, her servants redistributed, her name removed from public inscriptions. Her daughter was delivered anyway, and placed in the procession beside you. Neither of you spoke. Because what would there be to say? Now you understand the full shape of the system. The villas trained you, the palace refined you, the festivals exposed you, and the law ensured no one could stop it. Even those in power played along, because not playing was fatal. You learned how to live between the lines, how to smile without revealing teeth, how to cry without making sound. But the worst realization came later, when you saw the next group of arrivals. Children, being led down the same marble corridor where you once stood, and you, yes, you, were told to teach them how to walk, how to bow, how to survive. And you did it, not because you were cruel, but because it was the only way to matter again. You've stopped asking questions, not because the answers frighten you, but because you already know them. Why were you chosen? Because someone wanted you. Why didn't they stop? Because no one made them. Why did no one save you? Because Rome was built to ensure that no one would. You sit now in the colonnade of a villa overlooking the Bay of Naples, the sea curling gently in the distance. The air smells of salt and jasmine. A slave child runs past, barefoot and laughing, and your eyes follow them, not with jealousy, not with pity, but with warning, because you know what comes next. And what comes next has nothing to do with cruelty. It has everything to do with normalization. The climax of Rome's system wasn't a single act of violence or spectacle. It was this, turning what should have been unbearable into something mundane. You remember it too clearly. One winter night, during the Saturnalia feast, a visiting equestrian knight brought with him 3 boys, barely clothed, carefully perfumed, each trained to offer gifts in exchange for praise. They were not slaves. They were freemen, children of poor citizens, leased by their parents to serve as seasonal companions to Rome's elite. This wasn't punishment. It was opportunity, and it was legal. The Roman jurist Ulpian, writing in the 3rd century CE, stated that libertus voluntatem habet. A freedman has the right of consent. But consent under Rome's shadow? It was a tool of the powerful, offered only when the outcome was already decided. In practice, it meant nothing. More than 3 centuries into empire, the lines between citizen and slave had blurred. not to elevate the enslaved, but to devalue the free. Poor Romans began offering their children to the households of the rich, not as property, but as tribute. No chains, just need. And Rome welcomed it. The familia urbana, once composed of strictly enslaved staff, began to include children from citizen families. A new term emerged in documents from the Imperial archives: operarius delicatus, the chosen working child. Often placed under apprenticeship, these children lived, slept, and performed alongside the enslaved. But unlike slaves, they could leave. Except none of them ever did. Why? Because the system didn't require chains anymore. It only required incentive. And you? You became part of that system too. Not as a performer. Not anymore. Now you are the trainer. Your job is to instruct, to monitor, to correct. You stand behind them in silence as they are examined. You whisper reminders during their first performances. You record their mistakes in wax tablets by oil lamplight. And when one of them cries, you don't comfort him. You offer the same words once spoken to you. This is Rome. You are lucky. You don't believe it, but you say it. Because now you are proof that the system works. The boy assigned to you is from Carthage, 9 years old, big eyes, soft voice. One night he asks if his mother will come visit. You tell him, of course. And the lie tears something inside you that cannot be stitched back together. This is Rome's final cruelty. Not what it did to your body, not even what it made you do to others, but what it trained you to feel nothing about. The poet Juvenal once wrote, "What man can remain innocent in the palace of Caesar?" He meant corruption, bribery, betrayal. He did not mean you, but he should have. Because your innocence didn't vanish in a moment. It was eroded, piece by piece, until what remained looked enough like virtue that no one noticed what had died, not even you. By the time Emperor Diocletian begins his reforms, the old systems of household slavery are fading, not because of morality, but because economics changed. Tax burdens shifted, villas downsized, public festivals grew rarer. And with them, so did the performances. Not abolished, just no longer efficient. You are given new duties. Ledger work, language instruction for provincial youths, quiet consultation in matters of household elegance. You age out of visibility. And when the day comes that no one calls your name anymore, you almost feel relief. Almost. But then you see the next generation, and everything comes rushing back. You were a child when Rome took your body. You were a man when Rome taught you to offer others. And now, all that's left is memory. Except it isn't gone. It's woven into the very fabric of civilization. Resolution and reflection. You thought the horror would end with the empire's fall, that the collapse of Rome would bury its practices along with its statues and temples. But history has a cruel talent for preservation. The Roman model, using power to shape not only action but identity, became the template for centuries of hidden servitude. It echoed through the noble households of medieval Europe, through the courts of Renaissance kings, through colonial palaces and gilded salons, where silence became currency, where survival meant complicity, where obedience replaced innocence. The legacy of Roman sexual slavery in private homes was not an aberration. It was a system. And systems don't vanish. They evolve. You've just stared into the darkest corners of a world that claimed to be civilized, and found something far more terrifying than any battlefield: systemic dehumanization accepted as daily routine. Subscribe to the channel to keep exploring the hidden histories no one dares teach. The past doesn't just repeat itself, it hides in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to see it clearly. Even now, you can trace its fingerprints. In the exploitation of dependency, in the glamorization of obedience, in the quiet acceptance of power unchallenged, so long as it wears silk and speaks softly. And that's why this history matters. Not because it's ancient, but because it's unfinished. You entered this story believing Rome was a cradle of reason and refinement. But now you leave knowing it was also a crucible of obedience, enforced through bodies too small to resist. If confronting these buried truths has awakened your curiosity, if understanding the systems behind the silence empowers you to see history more clearly, then stay with us. There are more stories like this, and every single one deserves to be remembered.